What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017, getting into the week here. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And as usual, my web server is under DOS attack to keep you from finding out the things the government and certain corporations don't want you to know about, because it just confuses you. You know, you don't need to know all that stuff there. Anyway, getting on into it, quick little program note. Tomorrow afternoon, in our third hour, Ellen Brown will be our on-air guest talking about economics and recent developments. Monday, June 5th, Gilad Otzman will be here talking about his new book and his recent concert and lecture tour as well. Now then, we're seeing a lot of stuff in the media, obviously, about this terror attack that happened in Manchester just yesterday. And a lot of people are coming on out, and they're starting to say exactly the same thing. After all these terror attacks, it is very obvious that all this intrusive security is not working. It simply is not working at all. And here's where it gets interesting, because apparently this guy who supposedly set off this bomb, 23-year-old Salman Abedi, was known to authorities. They knew he was a potential problem, and still he was able to walk on in there and do whatever it was that he did for whatever nefarious purpose he had intended, and we still don't really know what that is. But there's the point where all this spying, reading of our emails, and all was supposed to protect us from acts of terror. It does not work. They haven't found one. They haven't stopped one. It's still going on. Huge waste of time, money, not to mention a violation of the Constitution. And, of course, everybody's pounding on this thing for the propaganda value. Story out of the IB Times in Great Britain. Focus on the victims of the Manchester attack. Our children murdered in cold blood. And then they have a line further down there. Once again, the terrorists and their sympathizers will justify their barbaric acts under the false premise of challenging the West's foreign policy. Boy, they're laying on the propaganda so thick. It almost makes me wonder, was this really another false flag? Because certainly it arrived in a timely manner to drive Seth Rich off the corporate media's programming. Not that they were covering it all that much, other than to shout ridicule and abuse at those of us who refuse to accept the official propaganda. But even CNN was out there suggesting the Manchester bombing might be a right-wing false flag. This is coming from CNN's terror analyst Paul Cruikshank, and that was on last night's Anderson Cooper, that it could be a false flag. Everybody's just getting used to the idea that when these events happen, we don't really know who is behind them. Yes, somebody can send up a video or make a phone call saying, it was me, it was me. I love it when there's some kind of a terror attack and you have 4 or 5 different groups trying to take credit for it. No, we did it. We're the villain. No, we're the villains over here. And showing once again how utterly tasteless our corporate media has become. Over at CBS, one of their contributors, David Levitt, put out a tweet about all the people killed in Manchester and then added what he thought was a joke. Last time I listened to Adriana Grande, I almost died too. Which is tacky in the extreme. And he's been rightly criticized for it. But they're laying on ISIS and Al-Qaeda all over again. Oh, you've got to be afraid. You've got to be afraid. They're coming to get you. And one example here is, this is in the Express, Great Britain. ISIS is in a plot to blow up British ports by planting bombs on fuel tankers. Which, with conventional explosives, depends on what's in the tanker. But now they're going to have deployment of special forces to search for mines attached to tankers, which is pretty much the only way that you can defeat that kind of a situation. But that is a vector. But there's another one that's even easier, and that is a cargo container. Those things are sealed at the point of departure, and they're not opened before they arrive at the destination. They're usually not opened at the shipping ports, unless there's reason to suspect something is inside that the police have a warrant to look for. Now let's get on to Seth Rich here. because Detective Rod Wheeler has released a statement concerning the death of DNC staffer Seth Rich, in which he reiterates, "I am still of the opinion that his murder may be tied to his employment." Now, Kim.com is offering to come to the United States. He faces charges here, but he's willing to come here to testify before Congress, saying that he was a friend of Seth Rich. He was involved with the transfer of the stolen DNC emails stolen by Seth Rich to WikiLeaks. So we have it right there. Remember, Assange even obliquely referred to Seth Rich as an example of the risks people take when they engage in whistleblowing. And, of course, the corporate media is trying to just smear everybody on this story, say it's ridiculous, it's tinfoil hat, it's conspiracy theory, because, first of all, they have to protect the fact that it was a murder, and they have to protect the murderers, but more importantly, the entire corporate media has gone all in for month after month after month after month about how Russia hacked the DNC emails, even though there was never any real evidence for it. It was all based on a report by CrowdStrike, which was a company hired by the Democrats to maintain their servers, and even CrowdStrike has now backed off and said the methodology by which they deduced that Russia was behind the hack was flawed, and so they can't actually say that anymore, trying to salvage their reputation. And everybody's just pushing it. Russia helped the election, helped Donald Trump, stole the DNC emails, and that's why they're trying to keep that story there. Because if it comes out that Seth Rich was the DNC leak, and the evidence is certainly strong for that, then the corporate media is once again exposed as lying to the American people, for which they are paid very generous sums of money. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take some phone calls. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. No, actually, as far as my Seth Rich goes, they know that he was connected to WikiLeaks. It's obvious that he was murdered by somebody at the DNC. I mean, who else would have killed him? Perry? But anyway, what I wanted to talk about is about this terrorist attack yesterday.
Yes.
I don't believe it's a false flag the way you and me think of a false flag, you know, it's arranged and everything else. There's no need for that anymore. What's happening is the governments, the Western governments are bringing these people in from all over the world, some of the work, without checking them or anything else. And they know what they're going to do. Like, I found out that this guy's family evidently comes from Libya, and they supposedly escaped, quote, and that's in quote, Gaddafi. Now, why did they escape Gaddafi? Gaddafi wasn't hurt. If you were a good citizen in Libya, Gaddafi could be your best friend. I mean, he probably would give you the shirt off his back. They were there. He was doing great.
He was doing great things for Libya at the time of his death.
He certainly was. What probably happened is they probably wanted to bring their virulent strain of Islam, probably Wahhabi-like, and take over Libya with that. And at the time, U.S. government and others weren't helping to overthrow Gaddafi yet, so they had to get out. And then they brought this thinking with them to Britain. So what I'm saying is, let's say you're employed as let's say you own an exterminator business, right?
Yes.
And you want to convince your neighbor to hire you. So get a chance, you put a bunch of, mosquitoes or wasps or something, some kind of stinging, biting insect, sneak them into the house. Now, those insects are going to do what they do. They're going to start biting and stinging and whatever.
Yeah.
The same thing when you bring a bunch of terrorists in. They're going to do what terrorists do. They're going to commit terror. They're going to mass murder, terror, whatever else. But there's no need anymore to start saying, okay, we're going to do it in such and such date, such and such time, blah, 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 blah. You're letting them in. They're letting these types of people in, and they're going to do what they normally will do, and that's commit terror. And that's what's really happening. So it is a false flag, but not the way we think about false flags.
Well, that's one way of looking at the fact that the authorities knew who this guy was and did nothing about him suggests that he'd been recruited as an asset. And they just put them in
But
place.
you haven't recruited after they didn't care. Maybe they just don't care. They figure, you know, so what? They want this because they want turmoil. They want to destroy society. They want to destroy everything, especially in Western society.
Well, they want to scare everybody into psychological dependence on the government to protect them. But again, at this point, following all of these attacks, the reaction of most people is obviously the government can't protect us. We're doing something fundamentally wrong, and certainly the fact that we're invading all the countries and bombing all the countries these angry people are coming from, either we need to stop bombing those countries or we need to close our borders to protect us from people who have been made angry by these interventions into their country.
Absolutely, but they don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do it? Because it helps push what they really want, and that's a one-world government, total control of the population, probably kill most of us off, and have to keep basically the rest of us slaves. This is what their goal is. I've put it two and two together. I've looked at this various things. I'm now convinced that this is exactly what's going on. Everything points to it. This government, the British government, the biggest hope I think we have right now is Russia. Putin is not one of them, and maybe the American people with the Second Amendment. And I say one other thing about Putin. Okay, I don't know if you ever saw Boys from Brazil.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the cloned Hitlers?
Yes.
Well, you know what? It'd be nice if some scientists would have cloned Putin. Put a Putin in every country, at least in every major Western country, including the United States, to have him then come to fruition and take over. That would be beautiful. Then we would have a world.
Well, you need to remember that simply cloning somebody does not clone their knowledge, their consciousness, their point of view. And even in the movie Boys from Brazil, all these cloned boys were being raised in recreated circumstances that matched those of the young Adolf Hitler. So merely cloning Putin is not going to get you Putin unless the clones are raised with exactly the same life experience that the original was.
You know, at the end, at that Doberman ranch there.
Yes.
The guy, I think the old man there was a correctional officer or something like in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And Mengele killed him, but the son, who was of course the clone of Hitler, wound up sticking the dogs on Mengele instead of the other guy, who I guess was Simon Wiesenthal. They gave him a different name, Lieberman, but I'm sure he was supposed to be Wiesenthal.
Yes.
He was actually killed by his creation, what he considered his creation. So I mean, you're right there. I mean, I'm just joking about it. I mean, I'm just saying if you're going to do something like that, wouldn't it be nice if every country would have their own Putin? You know? Yeah.
Little footnote to the movie though. My hat is off to Laurence Olivier because he was playing the Wiesenthal character in that movie, and the movie he did just before that was The Marathon Man, where he played Mengele. So it was like he got to play both sides of the spectrum.
He called him somebody else, but that's who he was supposed to be.
Yeah,
I know. It's true. And Gregory Peck was great in that movie also. I got to see those two.
Yeah, they were well done movies.
It was awesome acting.
You know, anything about Hitler and Nazis, they get the big budgets and the top talent. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. We're going to go to Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, you hit it right on the head. Stop doing what you're doing that makes people want to hate you and come after you, and pretty much terrorism goes away. But, terrorism, it is an ideology. It's in the mindset. And when somebody is willing to trade their life to kill, masses of people, and unless you can get inside their head and figure out who the person is, you probably just ought to back off, stop doing those things that tick off people that make them want to come after you. I mean, terrorism would disappear overnight if we'd stop meddling in other countries' affairs.
Well, there would still be the false flag terrorism. There's always going to be false flag terrorism. In fact, I think most terrorism probably is false flag for the simple reason that the terrorists are not going to achieve any kind of socio-political agenda without popular support. So when you're going out and doing things that make you look bad in the eyes of the general population, you are dooming your own agenda. Imagine back leading up to the American Revolution, if George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had gone around the colonial schools shooting children, how much support would they have had for the revolution against King George III? Absolutely none. And that is why I think most terrorism is in fact false flag. But again, if you're going to be bombing other people's countries and they're going to be hating you for that, close your own borders so they can't get back in to do this. The way they're handling it between all of these interventions all over the world and then opening up the borders at the same time, it's like an invitation to have this mayhem on everybody's streets. And again, the government says, oh, well, we have to have more spying authority. But the people are now saying it doesn't work. We've already had years and years of the NSA listening to our phone calls and reading our emails and all of our computer, everything. They can turn on the camera and watch what we're doing, and it doesn't work. It does not work. So give us back our Fourth Amendment right to privacy and start focusing your efforts on the really bad people. And again, the authorities knew who this guy was in Manchester, and still he was able to walk on in and do whatever he did.
Well, I agree. I totally agree. One word you're never going to hear in mainstream media is the term called blowback. You're never going to hear that. Those are the consequences when you meddle and you meddle in other people's affairs. Blowback. You never hear it. John Stadno talks about it all the time, and that's a word you will never hear from mainstream media. These are consequences for our actions of bombing and killing innocent people. Hey, that's not going to bring friendship. That's going to bring people that hate you and want to hurt you. Until we stop, it'll continue on.
It absolutely will, and blowback is a reality. In fact, it's pretty much a constant because all of these actions taken by any nation in terms of foreign policy, they're always thought through in terms of a short-term goal. We want to make sure that Iraq is selling their oil only for the U.S. dollar. We want to get rid of Libya's state central bank and the gold dinar. And then they figure the operation is over, they've achieved their success, and that's the end of the story. But it never is. There's a blowback. A good example, of course, would be 1953, when the CIA, and they now admit they did this, they overthrew the elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh and installed the Shah in Iran. And the goal was to guarantee low-price oil to British and American oil companies. And once that was done, everybody said, huzzah, huzzah, it's a success, and they moved on. But it did have a blowback in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Keep the fight up.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're doing the best that we can against some extraordinarily adverse circumstances. Getting on back to Seth Rich. Sean Hannity, I have to applaud for him. He is standing up and he's giving his show as a platform for Kim.com and everybody else involved in this Seth Rich case. And he's now under attack. Newt Gingrich is out there saying this needs to be looked at. And he's being smeared in the media. That's the only coverage you're getting in the media about Seth Rich is just attacks on the character and the agenda, the motive of those who would dare impugn that Seth Rich was murdered or who would question that Russia hacked those DNC servers. So there's been a new revelation. Apparently, when this private investigator, Wheeler, started looking into what was going on. Apparently, Donna Brazil actually called the police and the family of Seth Rich and demanded to know why they had a private investigator snooping into Rich's death. And so apparently the fact that not everybody was buying the botched robbery story was making them very, very nervous. And I think they're very, very nervous right now. Let's see, article that came on out of Investment Watch blog. This is from Pamela Williams, and there are a lot of them like it, saying there does have to be a more complete investigation into this. Why don't we have the tapes from the police officers' body cameras? Why was the owner of the bar that were and the employees there, the last people to see Seth Rich alive, not even questioned by the police? Why did they not look at the security surveillance tapes to see if somebody was sort of following him and casing them out? There are security cameras all over that neighborhood where Seth Rich was shot. And none of those tapes have been examined. Of course, by now they've already been overwritten, and that's the whole point, not leave any evidence behind. And we do need to look at that doctor's comment that Seth Rich's bullet wounds were not fatal, and he should not have, in fact, died at the hospital. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call. Matthew in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, aloha, Michael. Yeah, I have a comment on one thing that you've talked about, and then I wanted to ask a question or two on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But my comment is on the laptop thing. I heard some of your shows you talked about how it was no way to put a bomb in these laptops and stuff. I think what the other stories I hear, the reason that they want to ban these laptops is the Israelis have designed some software. I don't know if you mentioned this on any of your shows that could possibly remote control an airplane from these laptops. Did you ever hear anything about that?
I've heard it suggested, but the fact is the cabin Wi-Fi network is isolated from the flight deck. There's no connection. There's nothing that you can do on the cabin Wi-Fi that can get anywhere near the flight control computers on the aircraft.
Yeah, that's what I would think too, but who knows what they invent these days. I don't know why I hear that, and that's exactly the first thing that would come to my mind too, is that you can't get on the network, or I don't know, technically how it would work, but that's what the story is. They say that Israelis have developed some secret software or something where you can, like I said, remote control the aircraft from a laptop. So anyway, question I've got on these Bitcoins and these cryptocurrencies, I kind of understand them, and I think a lot of it makes sense, but two questions is, I heard this question, what happens if the internet goes down and you can't access your money? And the other thing is, what stops anybody from just creating some new kind of currency, to where people will pile onto their new currency, and all of a sudden your currency goes down? What are your comments on that?
Well, your first concern is extremely valid, whether it's cryptocurrency or even just your money in the ATMs and the banks. If the internet goes down, you're cut off from it. And in this age of widespread malware and just breakdown of the IT infrastructure in general, it's ridiculous to be talking about a cashless society. Absolutely, if it's going through the internet, you're dependent on that internet. If the internet is taken down, you are in serious trouble. Now, as far as anybody can create a currency, anybody can. Whether or not it works is if you're able to create confidence in the general public that this will be a stable, reliable currency. And the problem that cryptocurrency has is the same exact one that the Federal Reserve note has. It does not have a base on a commodity of known fixed, globally understood value. And by commodity, I mean ounce of gold, ounce of silver, gallon of gasoline, something like that, where you can walk into anywhere on Earth with the gallon of gasoline and you'll be able to trade using it. Or if you have a token that says good for a gallon of gasoline that can be redeemed for a gallon of gasoline, that can become a monetary unit. That's a stable currency. And I've expressed over the last couple of days, this run-up on Bitcoin feels very, very suspicious. Bitcoin is succumbing to the worst abuses of any other currency. And now we're hearing other voices saying that there is going to be a correction on Bitcoin.
Okay, that's good. So I guess from your comments, and I feel the same way that, gold or silver or cartons of cigarettes or something with, gasoline, anything seems to be. I would have more confidence in that.
Bullets have been used as a unit of currency. During the gold rush, the gold miners would go into a bar and they put a bullet on the bar and say, I want an ounce of whiskey, and that was considered a fair trade. That's where the origin, a shot of whiskey, comes from.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for taking my call, and I really enjoy listening to your program, and I hope you and Lady Claire make it back to the mainland soon.
We would really like to.
And stay in here.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. Now, getting on back to Donald Trump and the Democrats and all the rest of this other nonsense. As you know, they've been screaming impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. They don't really have a reason. Impeach him because he's crazy. Impeach him because he was talking to the Russians. Impeach him because he doesn't like Hillary Clinton, and on and on. Well, that move has now hit a major stumbling block, and we will talk about that when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, ever since Donald Trump won the election last November, we have seen all of these efforts to try and basically undo that. We had all the liberal snowflakes that were rioting in various places across the country and saying Trump is not my president, and Hillary and her resist movement, and then all this talk about impeachment. Impeachment because he's crazy. Amendment 25, get him out because he's crazy. Impeachment over possible connections with Russia, blah, 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 blah. And they've been pounding it and pounding it and pounding it. Well, apparently the Democrats actually got to a point where they thought it was time to take a poll to see what the American people's reaction would be if the Democrats went ahead and tried to file articles of impeachment. And apparently the poll numbers were an absolute disaster for the Democrats, because the American people understand this is all smear and rumor and innuendo and spoiled baby Democrats that are unwilling to accept the fact that they ran a candidate nobody really liked, nobody really wanted. And so all of a sudden they're pulling back. They're pulling on back and saying, well, the impeachment, it's not going to happen now, and basically they're trying to pull back and make it look like they're going to be magnanimous and give Donald Trump another chance. But in effect, basically, the top Democrats have admitted defeat on the impeachment issue and basically acknowledged it was all one big lie. And the Democratic leadership are now sending out messages to the rank and file saying there isn't going to be a silver bullet any time in the future to take down Donald Trump. And we have had leading Democrats admit, so far, there is no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. It's just all been a political smear, propaganda in the corporate media. And that's all it ever was. So now we have the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes are out there with editorials saying, we do have to just sort of let this whole impeachment thing go. There's no there, and really we need to stop talking about this and focus on more important issues. And one of the issues the Democrats need to deal with is they have lost a huge amount of their support. And mostly from rank-and-file Democrats who are still, to this very day, extraordinarily angry over what the Democratic leadership did to Bernie Sanders. And now, what's made it worse is the Democratic leadership took the position that, yeah, it's up to us to pick the candidates. Yeah, we're going to go through the primaries and everything, but really, ultimately, it's up to us. Down in Florida, as you know, a bunch of Bernie Sanders supporters have filed a lawsuit to recover their donations that they donated to the Democratic National Committee to get Bernie Sanders nominated, because they're saying the Democratic Party collected that money under false pretenses. And their lawyer, the Democrats' lawyer in the court, is saying, no, it's not under false pretenses. They should have known we were going to give this thing to Hillary Clinton. So they're basically, as a result of that, the Democratic Party right now, their bank account is almost empty. Their fundraising efforts have tanked. Nobody is supporting them right now. They may have destroyed themselves with the Hillary campaign. And we're still hearing talk about people like Bernie Sanders or even others just breaking off and forming a new party. One that would take most of the Democratic rank and file with it and have enough of a voter base to really get onto the ballots and actually become a new party. And you need to remember, when this country was started, there was no two-party system. Anybody could start a political party, and if you could get support for your political party, it would grow, and you would run your candidates, and you would hopefully get into office. The two-party system exists in order to prevent outsiders from getting in. And it also makes it less expensive for the money junkies to bypass the will of the voters by contributing to all the candidates. Before the two-party system, the money junkies would have to donate to 5 or 6 parties to make sure they were still going to be in control after the election. Today it's only 2. Saves them a bunch of money. Now, let's see. So where are we? Let's see. Our corporate media has become a joke. Foreign policy is a joke. Our economy is a joke. We'd all be laughing if it wasn't so dangerous, because they're out there wagging those nuclear weapons. Now, Donald Trump, as you know, is on his whirlwind tour across the globe on Air Force One. And I can imagine the jet lag must be horrific for him to deal with and still do his job. Trump is talking tough on terrorism and extremism in the Middle East, but let's face it, this is all about guns, oil, and money, and building a new alliance bloc with which to dominate the Middle East again. Now, as you know, there's this huge arms deal in Saudi Arabia, and it's a lot of money, and the stocks of those defense contractors really soared yesterday, and everybody's saying, oh, there are going to be jobs for people to make bombs and bullets and so forth, but not a word about what they're going to be used for. And there are two issues that are dangling out there. One is the continuing, ongoing war crimes inside Yemen, and what appears to be a buildup for a war against Iran. So it's kind of interesting to see Donald Trump talking about peace in the Middle East while he's selling weapons left and right. Now, according to former CIA official Phil Giraldi, Trump's Mideast tour is paving the way for that war with Iran. He's building this coalition between the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and that's going to be the united front to try and push back against the Russia, China, Iran bloc. There we go. In fact, there's an article that came out of Sputnik News, the baneful apocalyptic triad of USA, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and they mention watching this spectacle with a foreboding sense of horror. We are edging closer and closer to outright world war. We're going to take a phone call. Tom in Baltimore, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I always wondered what that wonderful wife saw in you. Clearly she's a prettier than you, and,
yes.
And clearly you married up.
Yes.
And you're kind of grumpy. You're mostly right. I mostly agree with you. But today I realized what it was. When you got up in those Bermuda shorts, you got some great legs, my friend. I'm jealous.
Well, I live in Hawaii, and shorts are just kind of the way it is. And my diet has gone to the point where I'm actually having to buy new clothes because the older ones were just falling right off of me, and these were on sale. So that's why I got them.
No. The compliment about your legs was sincere. You got the legs of a 20-year-old. I'm an old man like you, but I don't have. You look like you've been working out.
Not really, not as much as I ought to be. I need to be doing more walking, and certainly now that summer's here, more swimming. And I'm afraid my lifestyle is fairly sedentary, and I don't think I get enough exercise. And mostly I've been trying to get down to my target weight and then start working out to get the musculature back. But at this point, I'm on the verge of thinking maybe I'll try and get out of my financial mess by writing a diet book, The Curmudgeon's Diet, about how I knocked 100 pounds off. And it'll be very serious about, things to avoid, things to make sure that you're not depleted on, and along with some other humorous anecdotes. But diet books always seem to sell really well, so I think I may try that.
Maybe subtitle it, Youth is Truly Wasted on the Young. Hey, Michael, I wanted to talk.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the two-party system. Parties in general were anathema to the founders. They escaped, what they called factions, and were running into exactly what they feared. Of course, they didn't go very long before we had a party system, but I don't understand why we simply, like the founders, can't look at the Constitution and say, this is what we all agree on, let's work to that end. And certainly it seems today that the country is split, of course, not 50-50, but it seems that you have about half the country that truly does want a socialistic, communistic almost type of government with ceding their power, which really truly belongs with the people, to bureaucrats and politicians. They want more laws and rules. And then you have the other half who truly want a constitutional republic, who, let's call them the conservatives. And I don't see how at this point in time, truly, we can come to any more compromise on either side. We can't force them to think like us, and they can't force us to think like them. I truly would like to see an amicable split, but I don't think that's something that realistically would happen.
Well, there's not going to be an amicable split because, unfortunately, it's not like you have all the wannabe communists in one area and everybody else in the rest. It would be like India and Pakistan, where they were trying to sort out the Hindus and the Muslims, and there was a mass migration to try and deal with that. The issue here is that, especially in ages of insecurity, where people are not optimistic about the future, the idea of a political system that guarantees them a minimum support for life looks very, very attractive. Whereas when you're in times of prosperity and the future looks really, really good, people are willing to take that chance of just going out on their own and trying to make their life better through hard work. And they're willing to accept the possibility that they could stumble and fall and fail, because that's what freedom really is, the freedom to succeed and the freedom to fail and the responsibility to accept either outcome. So when you're not sure, when you see that the country itself is in serious, serious trouble, and somebody says, well, we should go communist because that way we'll make sure that everybody has the basic needs of survival, as long as you do what... It actually is very, very attractive. It certainly was coming out of the Tsarist Russia, which is what led to the Russian Revolution. And it's certainly a foundation of the globalist agenda. The New World Order globalist agenda is a communistic, socialistic system.
Well, I'm second-generation American. My home country of Czechoslovakia, they split peacefully. I'd like to study more on how they exactly did it. But in this country, something has to give, because certainly the government has taken on fiduciary responsibilities by limiting the people from what they can do. If you tell people you can't have a garden, well, you got to feed them, right? So they've got to make a decision and go one way or the other, or we're just going to have a government that simply doesn't work like we see now.
Well, this idea of the government taking away our ability and our right to provide for ourselves is to manufacture a forced dependence on corporations. Everything that we need for life, water, food, whatever, is sold to us by a corporation in order to make us financial slaves to that corporation. And that actually is more fascistic than it is communistic.
True. But like I said, they've got to do something, because certainly you can't tell folks in their city, we're going to take away your food stamps, but where are they going to grow their garden? Where are they going to even travel? There are so many restrictions, so many areas where they've interceded unlawfully, I might add, into people's lives, that people, you're right, they force them into a corner, and we're getting what you get when you do that to people. And I'll leave you with that, Michael. Good show. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, my concern is that the thinking that we're seeing coming out of government tends to be very narrowly focused on a certain area. Nobody's really keeping the wide view. And I understand that Donald Trump, in talking about cutting food stamps and assistance in poverty programs, that he's being told by his advisors, this will encourage them to go on out and get jobs. And that's where they stop. The problem being the jobs are not there. We already have 90 million Americans, legal American citizens, who have not been able to find a regular, real job for months, if not years. And until you address that, the job market, until the jobs are there, cutting the food stamps and support for poverty, that's just going to increase the homelessness situation. And we know that in the long run, having a homeless population on the streets actually costs the government more than providing some kind of housing for them. Because there have been several cities in the United States that, rather than continuing to keep their homeless population homeless, they have started programs of very simple housing, but get them off the streets. And as a result, crime goes down related to the homelessness. Violence among the homeless goes down, and things basically calm down a little bit more. But unfortunately, it is the nature of the political beast to be thinking solely in terms of whatever agenda has been placed before them by their financial backers. And that is a big downfall of the system. If there's one person who's supposed to maintain that overview, it is the president. And unfortunately, Donald Trump does not seem to have that mental capacity. Sorry to say, I don't see it demonstrated. All right, we're filling up the phone lines. Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. How you doing? I appreciate you taking my call. I have a thought, but I would like to make just a suggestion first.
Yes.
On your diet and losing weight and everything.
Yep.
You know, the danger there, you could lose a lot of weight, work out, you could become a sex symbol, and Claire is not going to like that.
Well, you got to remember that Claire is also on a diet, and she's turning into a babe.
Well, you got to watch that side of it then.
Well, yeah, no, we're madly in love with each other. We don't stray or anything like that. Now, next time she's on the show on Friday, just take a look through the camera. She's turning into a hottie. She's laughing from the other room now.
Oh, I love you guys. But and I mean that too. You guys are just good people. But Michael, my thought is, I don't know if you got enough time for carry me over if you want, but. I was just thinking about, you were talking about the bomb manufacturing, the military-industrial complex, and the old saying, your government hires somebody to dig a hole and they hire somebody else to fill it in.
Yes.
They think that's productivity. Of course, we know it's not. You have to make things, you have to produce products and things. But just imagine how horrible this military-industrial complex in the trillion, whatever it is, Lockheed Martin and Boeing, everybody that's in it, huge, and they're not just digging holes and hiring somebody to fill it in. They're burying bodies of children, innocent women and children. That's the product of. I know it's war, and it makes me think of that old, Chambers Brothers, I think it was, war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. I mean, this is just. How do these freaking people sleep at night? I mean.
They're apparently they're perfectly comfortable with it. That's why they're our leaders. They don't have the moral inhibitions or the empathy that would limit their action. Anyway, listen, Mo, I'm going to hold you over. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're still talking with. I actually forgot. Mo in Florida, or is it Tom? Mo. Okay, so basically, well, what else did you want to say?
I was just going to make a comment, Mike. Mike, I appreciate you holding me over. My dad fought in World War II. He met my mother in England. He was stationed in England. He believed pretty much that he was doing what was right. But, he didn't have the internet. He's a college graduate. He was a smart man. It's not like, but he had to go to a library, look stuff up. It was government controlled. What excuse do our military have for bombing babies and mothers when they can go online and see the other side of it and find the truth? This is what I don't understand. I know they're brainwashed, but I got family in the military. I can't talk to them.
You're absolutely right.
They have
the high command, as it were, does in fact brainwash. It's part of your basic training. You're brainwashed to say, follow orders, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, don't ask any questions. Even Major General Smedley Butler, when he was writing about his life, said that while he was in service, he never asked any questions. It wasn't until after he retired and felt he was free to look back at what he had done that he began to realize what was going on. And we know that the Internet on military bases and military housing is heavily filtered. So they actually can't get to a lot of the sources of information that you and I have. It's even worse in an actual active war zone. They don't want those soldiers seeing anything that might discourage them from doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, I'll let you. I'll get off the phone here, Michael. But any military listening out there, you're killing innocent people. Stop it. Just stop it. Karma is a bad thing. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And I know there's a lot of older military people who, after they're out and they think about what they've done, it does come back to haunt them. The only people who walk away clean from what they do in war are the sociopaths, or maybe they just stay in the military or go into politics. Before we take the next phone call, a little update on the Seth Rich story. I mentioned only yesterday that it was a local Fox News affiliate in Washington, D.C. that came up with this story about Seth Rich being the DNC leak, and I said I can't imagine anybody at Fox Network being happy about that, and sure enough, Fox Network has now ordered the retraction of this story by their D.C. affiliate. They want it to go away. The official story is now, anybody thinking that Seth Rich was murdered because of him being the leaker is a conspiracy theorist. The Russians hacked the DNC email servers. Mahi dictum est, that is what you will believe. All right, we're going to start with Tom in Florida. I'm probably going to have to take you through the station identification. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. First off, this terrorist attack that happened last night is disgusting and horrible. But you know what? What's going to happen? A lot of venues now they're not going to be filled. The parents are not probably going to let their kids go see concerts. People are not going to start probably going to the movie theater. Hollywood's down 10% right now. Imagine now with this, it's probably going to bankrupt a lot of stuff that's going on with these concerts and all that.
Yeah, but
right now.
Whether it's a terrorist or somebody doing a false flag attack, they don't care. The people who did 9/11 didn't care about the people who were killed in the Twin Towers. When Roosevelt set up, go to Japan to attack Pearl Harbor, he didn't care about all the U.S. sailors who were going to be killed. That's the way that these kind of people think. All right, I'll have to take a break. Tom, have to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go back here to Tom in Florida. Tom, unfortunately, bad things happen in war, and our leaders, as it were, are able to do these bad things because they have no empathy for the people who are harmed by their decisions.
Yeah, well, you're right, Michael, but well, you know, as far as Europe goes, Michael, it seems like when I was just reading, every 9 days there's a terrorist attack in that continent. I don't know what it is, the stat is here in the United States, but it seems like every 9 days there's like a terrorist attack in the continent of Europe. I don't know what it is like, but I think right now, if Trump is if Trump's going to have any luck in 2018, Michael, he's going to first have to get rid of these 700,000 foreigners that are overstaying their visas. He's going to have to start building that wall. He's going to have to start doing massive deportations like Eisenhower did with Operation Wetback. And if he doesn't, I think the Republicans are going to be for a rude awakening. But I think if Trump does start getting rid of all these foreigners that are overstaying their visas, and he does something about the illegals at the border, we'll see how the outcome is. But as far as Europe goes, Michael, they're getting what they kind of deserve because look at, they're wide open, their borders. This Merkel berserker is insane. She's flooded Germany with these people, and you know they want to stay in their own country, their own continent where they're from. They don't really have to, but it's like a big ploy by the Bilderbergs or the Rothschilds. I don't know who it is, Michael Soros is. It's just one massive game, shell game. That's all this is.
Yeah, it really is. And again, this idea of going into all these other countries and dropping bombs on them, and then opening the borders to the people who lost their lives, their livelihood, their families, their friends, to those bombs, and who are going to be very angry to just come on in. And then they wonder why they're having like this incredible murder problem up in Sweden, the rape crisis all over Europe. These are angry people. As you say, they didn't really want to leave their homes, and they're going to be hostile to the new host country, and that is just the reality. And I sometimes wonder about the quality of thinking of our leaders. Maybe the only reason they're our leaders is because they are sociopaths, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're all that bright, because they sure don't seem that way.
Like
I mean, you had Nancy Pelosi out here today saying that the NRA was one of the intelligence agencies.
Disgusting.
Yes.
Yeah, but Michael, see that what you're saying is they're utterly bitter. These people are leaving their own homelands to go to Europe. They're so bitter and have so much hatred, like you're saying. I don't see it stopping. But this is all by design, Michael. This is design. And you know, I don't know whether to say. Look at you're talking about jobs. Well, actually, it seems like there's more jobs being created in Mexico than there is in the United States. Actually, I saw a report that they're building more homes in Mexico than they are in the United States of America. So there you go. I mean. It's unbelievable what's happened.
Well, housing starts have slowed down in the U.S. because nobody can afford to buy a house. We have all these millennials who, out of college, saddled with student loan debt. They can't even afford to rent a place, let alone buy a home. And so as a result, the housing starts are down. Nobody's asking for new homes to be built. In fact, there's a glut of empty homes on the market, especially here in Hawaii.
Right. Well, and another thing, Michael, that's not being reported too much is about how many Chinese are actually coming to the United States. You don't hear about that too much, but there's literally hundreds of thousands of Chinese that are coming to the United States.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
We have that here in Hawaii, and Jim Goddard is saying they got the same thing up there in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And they look down, they're looking down at like white America like you guys are a bunch of sissies, or seems like when I read this article here about the white leftists. I mean, it's unbelievable how the Chinese are acting toward all this. You know, what are you going to do? It's amazing what's going on.
Yeah, it is. And again, I understand that there does appear to be several overlapping designs at work here. But I think we need to mix in a good dose of stupidity and short-sightedness as well, because none of these programs seem to be working out very well for whoever's behind them. Anyway, Tom, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. And we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines off a little bit. International Rabbit in France. Bonjour, mon ami, comment vas-tu?
Bonjour. I just want to leave you with two comments. The first one is timely. I think we need to be prepared for a false flag, being that the Bilderberger meetings will be next month.
Yes.
And the second one is we need to keep an eye on Israel to see if they employ the Chinese to build artificial islands out in the Mediterranean so as they can displace the Palestinian people there.
Well, it's a possibility. I mean, Israel sort of has their own idea of where their territorial waters go, and the creation of new artificial islands would certainly allow them to project power. But if you look all over the Middle East, especially up there in the Gulf, everybody's building artificial islands these days. I love the ones over there that are actually shaped like a palm tree. And they're very artistic with these artificial islands. But yeah, that's becoming a common feature.
Okay, have you heard where the Bilderberger meetings will be this year?
I hear it's been announced, but I haven't looked at the information yet.
Okay, well, that's all I've got. Bonsoir.
Merci. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines for a bit so I can catch up on the talking points. We're also going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And turning over to Syria. Apparently, the Syrian army has expelled the U.S.-backed militants from the Syrian desert, and the Free Syria Army had launched an offensive to the area east of Suwaida, and the counteroffensive was dubbed Operation Desert Volcano, and apparently that has collapsed and they've been pushed back again. Every time there's a civilian killed in Syria that they can blame on Assad, it's headline news in the corporate media. But the reality is, according to this article over in Blacklisted News, that the U.S. airstrikes in Syria are now killing far more civilians than Assad's forces. But every time the U.S. kills a civilian, no, collateral damage. It's no big deal. You shouldn't worry about that. And especially when you look at the press coming out of the Manchester terror attack, where they're saying, grieve for our children. Yeah, we do grieve for your children. We also grieve for the children of Gaza. We grieve for the children of Yemen. We grieve for the children of Libya. And all these other countries the U.S. is trying to regime change. No dead or crippled child should be held up as somehow more important than the rest. And yet that's what our corporate media does all the time. Over in Macedonia, there's still a lot of turmoil. The U.S. tried to come in with a deal which apparently isn't working out, and it looks like the Balkans are now looking at a meltdown. The more the U.S. tinkers with other countries, the worse things get. This is very alarming. Ahead of the coming parliamentary elections in the Republic of Kosovo, one of the front runners for the position of Prime Minister, Ramush Haradinaj, states that if he wins, he does not see a place for either Serbia or Serbian municipalities anywhere in Kosovo. This is a guy who's literally running on an ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. And we've seen some really bad ethnic cleansings in that part of the world throughout history. Apparently, over in Austria, the centrist coalition has collapsed, and they have now set a date for a snap election. It'll be October 15th, to try and get a new government put together. Meanwhile, the Austrian people are saying that without that central federal government, things are actually going along pretty smoothly. They're being left alone. They're being allowed to just live their lives and do what they're going to do here. Now, over in North Rhine-Westphalia, they just had an election. And apparently there's accusations of election fraud over there as well. I remember when the allegations of election fraud in our country surfaced during both the primaries and the general election. The official story was, well, that's just propaganda put out by Russia. It's put out by Russia to undermine confidence in our election system. Well, Russia didn't need to do anything about it. They pretty much did it to themselves. And it was just weird to watch that timeline where when Donald Trump suggested that there might be problems with our election system, and there are, and Obama came out and said, it's impossible to rig American elections. And then as soon as Donald Trump won, what did they say? Oh, the elections were rigged. Jill Stein was out there calling for the recount. Hillary's out there saying that Russia's rigged our election. One of the reasons their propaganda is failing is because it's so self-contradictory. There's no continuity. There's no continuous narrative. The attitude seems to be, forget what I said last week, just believe what I'm telling you this week, and that is never going to be a successful propaganda campaign. A successful propaganda campaign has to create a consistent, believable alternative reality with which to mask the real world. And if the propaganda story doesn't make sense, it fails. And with each new propaganda fail, the people lose confidence and trust in the government and the corporate media. And they start looking for problems in the new propaganda, which is why we're in the situation we're in, where the government has such a low credibility rating. Back when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, it took 30 years to reach a point where half the American people knew the Warren Report was a cover-up. And today you can time the life expectancy of a government lie with an egg timer. Alrighty, now then, CNN is already out there in support of the eventual war against Iran. They're screaming about how ISIS is now aligned with Iran. Ooh, ISIS, those bad people who do all those terrible things. They steal socks out of your dryer. They put, lint in your sweaters and all that other stuff. And they're linked with Iran. They're linked with Iran. And so from now on, anytime ISIS goes on out and does something really nasty, the corporate media is going to say, well, Iran is backing them, so Iran is to blame. And we have seen this before. In the run-up to the war with Iraq, the corporate media kept claiming that Iraq was supporting al-Qaeda, and therefore whatever al-Qaeda did, including 9/11, it was ultimately Iraq's responsibility. And then, of course, it turned out that al-Qaeda and Iraq were not talking to each other. They were ideological enemies. Al-Qaeda favors theocratic rule, and Iraq was, at the time, the only surviving secular state in the entire Middle East. But this is what's going to happen. They're going to link Iran with ISIS, which we know is a manufactured terror group. ISIS will do a lot of really nasty things, such as the Manchester bombing, and the media will say, well, Iran is backing them, so Iran is ultimately responsible for the Manchester bombing. Interesting little article over at Zero Hedge. How Russia became our adversary again. And they're talking about the transition from Cold War to post-Soviet détente back to a new Cold War, potentially a hot war. And they're doing a very good job about reminding us all that during that Cold War, Russia wasn't being aggressive then either. Russia's only crime, if you will, was in resisting U.S. efforts to go on in and take over other countries to exploit their resources for the benefit of American corporations. And yes, the Soviets did stand rather firm on that, not letting the U.S. continue to expand and pillage the rest of the world. But and that's exactly what's happening here again today. Russia was never coming to invade the United States, either then or now. And with all this military buildup in Europe, they keep saying it's Russian aggression, Russian aggression. I'm not seeing any Russian aggression. I don't see Russian troops on the Canadian side of our northern border. I don't see any Russian troops and armaments on the Mexican side of our southern border. I don't see Russian aircraft carriers and warships tooling around the Gulf of Mexico or off the California coast. If those things were happening, then yes, Russia is the aggressor. But just look at a map of where the U.S. forces are across the globe, and you will know who the aggressor is. And that's it. Now, as you know, Sunday, North Korea had another missile test. This one was a shorter range test. It was a successful test, and the Security Council has already condemned it. You're not allowed to build weapons to prevent us from invading you when you want. And they're going to put new sanctions on North Korea, which will just drive it deeper and deeper into the Russian and Chinese sphere of influence. And there may be somebody trying to kick off a conflict because apparently early today there was, and they're admitting, it was an unidentified object that was seen flying from North Korea over the DMZ into South Korea. They're guessing that it's a North Korean military drone, but it led to South Korea issuing a warning and then firing some artillery as a warning. They didn't hit anything important. North Korea still has not responded. But with all the forces in the area, it could have been anybody's drone that was sent up there. Because I don't see any real need for North Korea to be sending drones into South Korea at this point. Not just one. If they were seriously concerned about a potential invasion, there would have been dozens and dozens of these drones. Just one? No. It feels like a setup to me. It feels like a setup. Apparently, Chinese President Xi Jinping has asked Donald Trump for 100 days to deal with the North Korea problem before the U.S. takes any military action. I think it would be a smart thing to do, but I don't think it's going to happen. The U.S. has a lot of military hardware on station off of North Korea, and 100 days is a long time for it to sit doing absolutely nothing or training exercises. And Trump right now is probably not feeling all that benign toward China because apparently China succeeded in dismantling an entire CIA spy operation inside China. And apparently between 2010 and 2012, China dismantled the entire CIA operation in China, rounding up, executing, and jailing up to 20 spies working for the CIA. And apparently one of the spies was literally executed in front of the building in which he had worked, as a public reminder of how China treats anybody who is spying for the Central Intelligence Agency. It's not like it is in the movies, folks. It's a nasty, nasty, nasty business. I'd be a lousy spy. I think I'd be a good analyst, but I'd be a lousy spy. And, of course, there's a question. How did China find this spy ring in 2010 and 2012? Let's see, who was president? And who was Secretary of State? And was there Chinese money pouring into that Clinton Foundation? See, if I'm right, and Hillary was selling secrets using that email server, that may be where China discovered there was a CIA spy ring operating in their country. Maybe where they got enough information to track it down. Now, apparently, Philippine President Duterte is out there saying that the U.S. is trying to get the Philippines into a fight with China. Gave a TV interview and said it's going to be a massacre. He's not even sure which way that's going to be. But he's basically out there saying the U.S. is stirring up this trouble. We don't want to fight. China doesn't want to fight. It's the U.S. playing you and him fight. And apparently they just had an ISIS attack, or a false flag ISIS attack, which led to Duterte declaring martial law on the southern province. So it does feel like we're in this very dangerous, fragile situation. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, turning over to Libya, as you know, there was a successful intervention in Libya a few years ago where the elected government was, well, taken out and a puppet regime put in. And then the people of Libya said, we don't want to live under a puppet regime. We want to decide our own government. And they started fighting back. And now we're in this quagmire in Libya again. And it's gone on for a very, very long time. It has not been a rousing success. And they were actually starting to have peace talks about sort of sharing Libya, forming a government that was partly of the internationally approved officials imposed on them and partly composed of elected representatives from among the Libyan people. And it looked like maybe they were going to cause this thing down. But apparently there was a massacre at Brak al-Shati that has got everybody just up in a fury. This is in South Libya, and this was a Libyan National Army air base, death toll over 140. And they're saying this could actually trigger an outright civil war. As I've said many times before, I think history books, looking back, will say that we were in World War III at this time in history. Actually have been for quite a while. Nobody wants to really say it or admit it. We haven't had a really big bang like the Lusitania or Pearl Harbor to say, yes, all these little battles all over the globe, let's just put them all in one box and call it a world war. But I think we're there. And I'm very, very concerned that the United States, while it ended World War II with the use of nuclear weapons, might conceivably start World War III with nuclear weapons. Even going on back to the administration of George W. Bush, they were pouring a lot of money into updating and refurbishing the U.S. arsenal of nuclear weapons. Now, the House of Representatives, the House Armed Service Committee, specifically the chairman, Representative Mac Thornberry, is now looking for official estimates from the Pentagon on what it will cost to have a permanent U.S. military presence in Europe from now on to guard against Russian aggression. They want to garrison Europe now. And basically saying that the U.S. forces need to be over there as the spearhead pointed at Russia to reassure the U.S. allies in the region. No, actually what's going on is they're reminding the people in Europe to just keep on doing as they're being told and go along with the agenda, because the Russians may be several hundred miles away across the border, but the U.S. forces are right there in your neighborhood right now. It's like how the Roman legions would garrison their captured provinces to keep them in line. Okay, now over in Greece, boy, I feel sorry for the people of Greece. They've been through so much already. And the latest debt relief deal has fallen through at the last minute. Everybody's fighting with each other. And here's the situation Greece is in right now. They are hideously in debt. And tragically for the people of Greece, much of that debt was created through fraud. When Papandreou worked with Goldman Sachs to conceal Greece's already considerable debt from the European Union, with a series of currency swaps, and Goldman Sachs made a huge amount of money off the deal, and the currency swaps resulted in almost doubling Greece's actual debt. And after Papandreou left, the next government coming on in looked at the books and realized they were in serious trouble. And this debt relief deal they're talking about right now consists of borrowing more money to make the payments on the earlier loans. The money will come on in and it will go right back out to the bankers, and none of it will benefit the people of Greece, who are even now still being asked to make do with less, lower pensions, lower public services. You must make do with less to keep the bankers happy, and that is becoming a tough sell. I would not be surprised if Greece broke down into riots like Venezuela. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I know we're in the middle of the economic news here, but I'm watching on Fox TV the hearings in Congress, these multiple hearings looking into Russia's interference in the election, and especially Brennan, who earlier today was out there saying, well, yes, in point of fact, sensitive information is shared with other governments, including Russia, but there's a proper way to do it through intelligence channels and not just in a meeting in the Oval Office. So, again, there's no there. They're just trying to create the idea that Donald Trump did something wrong. And it is the president's prerogative to declassify any information anytime he feels like. And the entire stink about that is not that he shared the information. It's that the original source of the information was upset that it was being done. Well, unfortunately, once you give information to another government, that government is going to do whatever they want with it. And again, getting on back to the Jonathan Pollard spy scandal, Pollard stole U.S. nuclear policy secrets and sold them to Israel. Israel promptly turned around and traded them to the Soviet Union in exchange for increased emigration quotas of Russian Jews to come to Israel. So Israel does not really have a place to complain. And again, according to those who were actually in that meeting, sources weren't revealed. It was just a general issue of there's a concern about laptops being turned into bombs. And again, that's nonsense. Unless they have those Samsung batteries in them, I guess. Maybe that might be a problem. But that's not terrorism at all. So basically, starting this morning with Brennan's testimony, he's out there trying to sell this idea that there's something there that needs to be looked at. And every time they keep coming on back, do you have any actual proof? And he was forced to say under oath, there is zero evidence of collusion with the Donald Trump campaign. Or to be more accurate, he says he hasn't seen any. And then they pushed him a little bit further and said John Brennan says he's not seen any evidence to back up the Washington Compost's unfounded claims that Trump had been asking multiple intelligence directors and members to deny Russia for him. That smear is based solely on this claim that Comey wrote a memo saying Trump asked him to drop the Michael Flynn case, and then just a couple of months after that supposedly happened, James Comey testified under oath that he had never been interfered with politically in any investigation. And now, of course, that article has been withdrawn because nobody can actually produce the memo itself. It was described over a phone call to the reporter, and the reporter went to story with it without confirming the actual memo. And it's rather appalling to see the corporate media behave like this, because I actually did take a journalism course when I was in college to get the electives that are not part of your major requirement, to broaden my education. I had a lot of fun, too. And at least in that class, they were teaching us the way journalism should be done. Multiple sources, confirmation, you never guess, you never bias. Come a long way since then. All right, getting on back to the economic news. Interesting article out of Zero Hedge, and it starts off talking about back in 2008 and the collapse of Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, which basically took out $65 billion is what he took away from his investors. And everybody understands he was running a Ponzi or pyramid scheme, which solicited new investments as a means to fund massive redemptions that would have otherwise resulted in the collapse of his fund before the FBI finally caught up with his scheme. Well, the FBI just dawdled because Harry Markopolos for years had been coming into the SEC with the evidence gift-wrapped on a silver platter saying, look, Bernie Madoff is running a Ponzi scheme. And they just sort of sat back and said, well, he's making money. That's a good thing. But it did finally fall apart, as all pyramid and Ponzi schemes do. And this article goes on to say that many of our states and cities today are running their pension funds like a Ponzi scheme. For that matter, so is Social Security. And every Ponzi scheme eventually collapses, like Bernie's did. Bernie's collapsed quickly because it didn't have that many people in it. Pension funds have a lot more people. When you're running a private central bank that is a pyramid scheme, you got a lot of room because you've got the entire population of the nation are caught up in it. But private central banking is a pyramid. It relies on new lending to help pay off the old lending. And now Greece is in this Ponzi scheme situation. They're having to borrow new money to make the payments on the old money. We know where that's going to end up. Greece's government is probably saying, let's just hold together until somebody else is in office. Now, apparently, senators from Maine and Oklahoma are calling for new legislation to ease the regulatory burden on smaller banks. And this may be a good thing, because overregulation can really hamstring a business. And in this case, we're talking about your basic depositor bank down on the main street of your nearby town. And that is a very separate entity from what we're talking about, private central banks or these Wall Street investment banks, which do need regulation because they have a long history of greed, stupidity. If you've ever seen that movie, Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's based on a true story. And it is like that. When there was this documentary called Inside Job, and they were talking with people on Wall Street who said, yeah, there's a lot of fraud. Fraud keeps a lot of businesses alive, and there's a lot of drug abuse. It's like a fairy tale la-la city. Everybody's just living in this alternate reality of incredible flows of money. But down on the ordinary depositor bank, they're a little more common sense. They don't have the liquidity to be getting that much out of control. There are problems. We hear occasionally of bank presidents who embezzle their own bank. But it may be time to look at what regulations are really needed and trim away those that were just added as the result of politics and campaigning. We know that overall, in the entire nation, there are tens of thousands of regulations that serve absolutely no purpose whatsoever, and they cost the government money, they cost the taxpayers money, they cost the businesses money, and maybe we could be better without them. Trim things back. Story out of Investment Watch blog. What is the true value of the U.S. dollar? Are the inflation statistics fake? Well, at this point, it would be a good guess to say yes, considering how many other so-called economic indicators have turned out to either be outright fraudulent or manipulated. We know that the unemployment rate is a manufactured number, and it is manufactured by excluding from the unemployment the people who have been unemployed over a certain amount of time. The unemployment number is just those who lost their jobs in the last few weeks. And it does not include the 90-plus million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. we know that there are two areas in which the inflation calculations are being biased lower. They exclude fuel and food prices, which is where inflation really starts to show up first. We know that the stock market is being manipulated to use as a political banner. And I think if you want to see a true indicator of our economy, just walk down your local Main Street. Look at all the empty retail spaces. Look at all the homeless people, the hungry people. Look at the deteriorated pavement, the crumbling infrastructure. That will tell you what the economy is really like. Because we've been in a wartime economy for decades, where everything that is produced by the labor of the people is siphoned off for the war machine, or for Israel, or for propping up Wall Street. And this brings me to another question. Yes, it is great that Saudi Arabia is buying $110 billion worth of U.S. weapons. I'm wondering where Saudi Arabia got the money, because they have not been doing very well economically. They got hit by the oil price war. They were forced to start selling state bonds for the first time in decades. Did the U.S. actually give them the $110 billion with which to buy the weapons? Was it a bit of a double shuffle because Trump didn't want to come on out and say, we're giving Saudi Arabia all these weapons to use on Yemen and Iran? Very often when we're told that we're selling weapons to thus and such a country, we find out on down the road that much of the money for the purchase actually came from the U.S. taxpayer. Happens in Israel all the time. Now, InfoWars put up a video. We linked to it at whatreallyhappened.com. The city of Baltimore is utterly collapsing. And it is an eye-opener. If you want to know what the real state of our nation and our economy is, you watch that. Baltimore, when I was a kid, was considered one of the great American cities. Everybody was comfortable, well cared for, a lot of great architecture. It's considered one of our finest cities, and now it is on the edge of collapse. And it's not the only one. Chicago is in a state of deterioration. We're seeing it happen all over. And it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. More bad news. Americans are falling behind on their auto loan and credit card bills. Household debt has exceeded the amazing levels reached in 2008. Only the rich can afford to live in the downtown parts of the cities, and they're trying to do gentrification there. They even tried that in Baltimore. Really rebuild the downtown area as a little conclave, or enclave rather, for the wealthy. And it didn't work because of their crime and immigrant and refugee problem. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the show in response to one of the phone calls. I have been expressing concern about the skyrocketing value of Bitcoin and thinking it cannot be sustained and that it might be a victim of manipulation. It might be a new bubble. I'm not the only person thinking that. Over at governmentslaves.info, they're talking about Bitcoin fever is just driving this up. And the reference is obviously to tulip mania, which was one of the great financial bubbles of history, one of the more ridiculous exercises in group insanity in the history of economics in the world. And the article here is saying that while we think the long-term future for Bitcoin is bright and optimistic, there has to be a big correction right now. It's overvalued. And as that caller mentioned, that's one of the problems with Bitcoin or any virtual currency. It is not tied to a commodity of fixed and universally recognized value. And thus it's always going to be subject to manipulation by the money junkies for their own reasons. We all know there's a big correction coming, and it's going to be ugly because of all the rigging to make things look like they're good up until now. Like the overvalued stock market. When the panic hits, the first ones out will be the only ones who get their money. And everybody else will be left holding a piece of paper, their last broker report with an impressive-looking number on the bottom. And that's all it's going to be, a piece of paper with an impressive-looking number on it. And what are they going to do when that happens? Well, according to this article over here in Patriot Rising, they're going to blame it all on Donald Trump. And we made that prediction on this show last year. So apparently, according to Friedman and Schwartz, we're heading for a big crash. And Ben Bernanke is actually saying, yeah, they're going to blame President Trump and an entire political ideal, meaning conservatism. Now, apparently, the European Investigative Collaborations has exposed the fact that Malta is the new pirate base for global tax avoiders. And it's actually marketing itself. Come to bring your money to Malta, and we will not let others take a look at what you've got here. It used to be Caribbean islands or Switzerland. Now it's Malta. And they're actively advertising, soliciting for people, corporations and wealthy individuals. Have your money vacation in Malta. We'll keep it safe for you. Now, turning to the immigration issue. Article out of Investment Watch blog, how many more innocent people need to die before we admit that Europe, America, and the world have an Islam problem? Now, I reject using the word Islam. It's really only incidental that the refugees are from mostly Islamic countries. But as I've mentioned many, many times before, migration is a filtering process. You're not getting the best people from those source countries. You're getting the ones who couldn't make it there. Very often you're getting people who were criminals in their old country and they're escaping prosecution. And as that other caller pointed out, these are people who are very bitter over the fact that they've had to leave their homes and go someplace else. And it's going to lead to all kinds of friction. And apparently it has. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about immigration, and we're talking about there is an ugly reality out there. Because migration is a filtering process that brings the worst segments of the foreign society into our country. It is causing problems. And I know the politically correct people and the globalists don't want much focus on it. But it is a reality. And it is harming innocent people. Apparently over in Dublin, there was a woman who was attacked by a foreign national. They're not describing exactly who he was. And apparently he's already been in jail for other offenses, but they still will not deport him. And so this guy basically attacked a mother right in front of her baby, just right out there in the open. Meanwhile, over in Berlin, a teenage Syrian refugee has been convicted for setting a homeless man on fire. So that's the situation over in Germany. And by the way, speaking of Germany, in the economic context, I had the great pleasure to work in Munich back in the 1980s. I never saw any homeless people. I never saw anybody begging on the streets. Everybody had jobs. Everybody had money. It was actually a very wonderful place. And now, apparently, they are being driven down to third worldism along with the rest of us here. We are still seeing all this nattering and gromishing going on about the Brexit, where Brussels is now taking this attitude that Britain must settle what it owes the EU before it's allowed to leave the bloc. They're trying to find anything they can put in the way of Great Britain actually leaving. But if you read that EU contract agreement, the part where the member states are allowed to leave the bloc, there's nothing in there about a price tag. They're just coming up with all this stuff and saying, well, you have to compensate us for the revenue we would have gotten from you. So the globalists are a little bit in trouble. Now, obviously, they dodged a bullet down in France because the election was clearly stolen from Marine Le Pen. And Merkel is now cozying up to Macron. She vows Germany will help him succeed as the French president. I'm not exactly sure what she has in mind. But she's, boy, that's a big helicopter. But Germany and France are now vowing to speed up the Eurozone integration. They've had the scare from the Brexit, from all these nationalists, Eurosceptics, coming really close to winning elections. And so now they're speeding up the integration. And now the Eurozone is basically saying Brussels wants to have every member state on the euro by 2025. Some of the member states, like Great Britain, are still on their own currencies. Even though the euro is crippled, they're now saying, you will use it by 2025. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from John in Phoenix. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, hello. Mike, unemployed psychologist. I was just reading that 78% of people who get their mercury fillings taken out and get them replaced with plaster or something more safe feel an increase in their health, both mentally and physically. I'm wondering why that's not being covered, but psychotropic drugs are.
Well, I think the reason is because they don't want to officially acknowledge that mercury fillings were a problem to begin with, or you're going to be seeing a lot of lawsuits filed against a lot of dentists and the manufacturers of those filling amalgams.
I didn't think about that. All right, well, I thank you for your time. Send my love to Claire. You have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. It is a sobering thought that very often when they discover that something that has been in use for a long time is causing harm, they'll very slowly try and fade it out of usage, but at the same time saying, no, there's no problem, in order to not have large corporations sued. And a good example of that, of course, would be the vaccine industry or other dangerous pharmaceuticals or various other products that have turned out to be less than wonderful. They'll just sort of fade them away and hope nobody notices. Try and avoid those lawsuits here. Now then, over in France, as you know, they're coming up on some eventual legislative elections following the presidential election. And apparently, France's equivalent of AIPAC has managed to force a second candidate out of the French legislative election for expressing support for Palestinian rights and international law. So if you're going to be screaming about one country meddling in the politics of another country, we ought to focus on the one that seems to do more of it than anybody else. Apparently, Italy is now considered the biggest threat to the continuance of the European Union right now. They dodged a bullet with France, but apparently Nandini Ramakrishnan, global market analyst at JP Morgan Asset Management, said that Italy is the biggest current threat to the Eurozone. And apparently it has to do with not so much an Italian exit, but the severe strain on Italy's economy and its banking system. We know they've been having a lot of problems with it. And again, one of the issues, when you start linking economies together, They are all basically hostage to each other in terms of an accident in one area can wreck them all. And that's always been one of my biggest arguments against globalism, because national borders serve the same function as fireproof doors in a building or watertight hatches in a ship. They contain an accident. If you have a fire in an office, the fireproof doors keep it from spreading. If you have a leak inside a compartment of a ship, the watertight hatches prevent it from spreading to other compartments. And that's the way it's supposed to work. But if you prop open the fire doors and the watertight hatches, it may seem things are better. You can get around faster, get more work done, but then the first fire that shows up consumes the entire building. The first leak sinks the entire ship. And the same is true with an economy. All of this rush to global economic synchronization results in one large system that is vulnerable to a catastrophe, as opposed to separate functioning economies where if one goes down, the others are still in good shape, can step on in and provide some support. It was because of economic globalism that the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud on Wall Street triggered a crisis in Europe. But apparently they did not learn from that. The globalists still want one world government, one giant private central bank to hold us all as debt slaves for the rest of eternity. We're going to take another phone call. Rob in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was thinking about something with the Seth Rich murder. Now, new information came out about him actually surviving and not dying on the scene, that he was taken to the hospital, that surgery was performed on him. Okay. Now, remember they did state that they were going to, in that WikiLeaks email, that John Podesta said we were going to make a example out of this person and out of the leaker. Now, you can call it a conspiracy stretch, but if when he was shot, he was only shot 2 or 3 times. One was supposedly an entry-exit wound. So he only had 2 bullets. Now, somebody trying to kill somebody doesn't really, I don't think they're going to just shoot him once in the back or whatever in a non-critical area. To me, it could potentially be that they shot him, wanted him to be discovered, take him to the hospital, and then feel like he was going to recover. And then they say, okay, you think you're safe in the hospital, and then they arranged to kill him in the hospital. So they had enough ability to conspire with a hospital to do that. That sure sounds like a real good way to send out a message.
Well, the problem there are 2 problems with that. First of all, you can't send out that message without basically admitting that's what you did. And since I'm a fan of Occam's razor, I tend to think that that he was shot with small caliber guns to try and keep the sound down. Maybe even been shot with silencers. And they were in a rush. They were in a panic. He'd apparently put up some kind of a fight because there were defensive wounds on his arms and other contusions. And so they may have shot him and simply botched it. They didn't hit a critical target because they were using small caliber weapons. But again, the simplest explanation is often the best. And to be very clear, the Podesta email said that he wanted to make an example of a leaker, even if they didn't really have a strong case that they were a leaker. But that was the attempt to send out the message to everybody else working for Hillary and the DNC. Right. And we know now that Hillary had bugged the computers of her own staff. I mean, that's how paranoid she was. So Seth Rich, would have had to have been extraordinarily careful about what he was doing, because he was probably enough of an IT expert to know that there was spyware on all the campaign-provided laptops.
Right. Well, either way, it's obviously the discovery of all this stuff is coming out. It's just whether or not there's enough people out there to have it matter, that can make an effective change on things, or become evidentiary. Because as we see, the FBI is still compromised as far as, being able to actually have a legitimate discovery of all evidence and prosecution of people that deserve it.
Well, unfortunately, we have a government right now that is scared for its very existence, and so they figure anything that they do to keep these scandals hidden is justified in terms of their own personal survival. So they're sticking with the official conclusion that it was a botched robbery, and they don't need to look anymore. And the corporate media is absolutely out there trying to scream that anybody who thinks Seth Rich was the DNC leaker and that was why he was killed is just a wide-eyed kook conspiracy theorist. And if you look at, they're attacking Newt Gingrich and Sean Hannity, who are people who have a great deal of stature going into this thing, and they're out there just saying, oh, these people, they're wackos, they're nutcases. And, of course, for anybody who understands the corporate media is not about the truth, the fact that they are on the attack is sending a signal. There is something there that is still being hidden. And, again, from the point of view of the establishment, they're seeing their survival, their perpetuation, under serious threat from the collapsing confidence and faith and trust of the American people. And so at this point, they don't want anything else to come on out that's going to remind the American people that, yes, assassination for political gain is still a reality in America today, and that the corporate media and the government are still lying to the American people despite the recent string of embarrassments. They're unrepentant. They haven't learned from their mistakes. They don't understand that they can't go on just lying their way through the American people like they have for the last century.
Well, they are acting like a cornered animal right now, which, they're doing.
They are.
Lashing out in ridiculous manners, and obviously, it's the greatest power struggle of all time right now.
Oh, yeah, they've declared open war on the independent media. They were trying to tarnish us with this ridiculous arm of Russian propaganda story. That's caused quite a bit of harm. Our server, we're getting as many DOS attacks now as we did just before the general election. They're acting like they're panicking, and they don't know what to do.
Yes, and I'm seeing it on the replays of your show and John's show. I've been meaning to talk to John about this, is that when you go back for replay, your show especially, Mike, you sound like you are slowed down from a third of your speed of talking, and it's garbled sometimes. And I'm not sure, that could potentially just be me, because I've earned a special place on the list. I don't know. I haven't. That's why I wanted to talk to John about it. See if he's had any other.
It's hard to know right now. If you're on AT&T, they've had apparently one of their main fiber trunks got cut somehow, and so AT&T is having serious problems today. And of course, Spectrum still can't get their act together, and so you don't know if you're dealing with nefarious intent or just the fact that our society is in a stage of collapse, and that includes the IT infrastructure.
Well, here's an example of why I feel it is actually an attack on you guys or your information.
Yep.
Is because your playback will be garbled and slowed down, but I can go back on RBN and I can go listen to John's show, the National Intel Report, or Vince's show, or any of the other shows, and again, sporadically it's John's show, and again, I'm not really. It's not like a rhyme or reason. I haven't taken the time to document it.
Okay,
but
well,
I do know that. So
yeah, well,
you're speaking the truth, sir.
Again, we know there's DOS attacks on my server. Sometimes they try and jam the BAM user feed because I only get so many streams for what I pay them every month. And it could be that they're trying to jam the podcast as well. And it's not just me. They're doing it to a lot of people. I've been trading emails with a lot of the other patriots, truth activists, and they say they're getting exactly the same thing, just trying to find some way to shut them down. And if it isn't through the computers, it's going after our advertisers. Or trying to get the advertisers to plant malware on our readers' computers. I'm dealing with that issue right now. and I got to make a comment here. Online advertising is totally out of control. There are advertisers who are openly abusive of their customers and clients, and it does need to either self-police or somebody's going to start saying it has to have regulation the way advertising on corporate media does. All right, well, listen, Rob, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. We're going to take another call from International Rabbit, but again, the rules are one call per person per day, but I'm going to let you go on this one because I think you got some information for us. What's on your mind?
Bonjour. I just found out that information, stumbled across it, about the Bilderbergers.
Yes.
It's going to be in Chantilly, Virginia this year, June 1st through the 4th.
Okay.
And that's all I've got.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the information. Chantilly, Virginia, starting first part of June, which is just, a week away here. All right. We're going to switch over to Joey in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm trying to follow this bouncing ball with this Seth Rich thing. Nobody seems to be bringing up the end result, where the ER doctor said that after they pulled all the bullets out of him, he was in good shape. But then the police came in and chased everybody out of the IOC room.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden he died. How come nobody's following up on that?
Well, we have been. We've been running the story.
I'll hang up now and I'll listen to you.
Okay. Well, actually, we have been following that story. We reported it the day that it broke. And again, this is coming from somebody who claims to be the doctor at the hospital ER where Seth Rich came on in. He's trying to remain anonymous. I don't know how successful he's going to be. But that coincides with the other report that we got from the police department itself, that Seth Rich was, in fact, still alive, conscious, when the police found him. And you would imagine that probably the police said, who did this? And Seth Rich may have said something in reply. It certainly is not in the police report. And the videos from the police officers' body cameras are missing. So, yeah, this looks like, well, Seth Rich has earned his place on the Clinton dead body list. And that is certainly getting a renewed interest because of Seth Rich. And, of course, there were a couple of other very bizarre deaths during this last political season. All righty, getting on back to the news in Europe. Apparently, Spain is dealing with Catalonia's desire for independence. Spain was demanding Catalonia, the independence people, come on in and debate it in Parliament. Catalonia said, no, we're not going to do it. In fact, we're going to declare independence. We're not even going to hold a referendum. We know that everybody here wants to get on out. So they're moving forward. They've drafted an independence bill to break away from Spain. It's going to be their version of the Declaration of Independence. And the only question is, are we going to see Spain go to war with Catalonia? Like, we need another war. I need to come up with a little graphic that just shows everywhere in the world where there's actual armed conflict taking place right now, and I'll bet you it's going to be pretty much everywhere. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, is now out there deciding that he has enough money to join the club of the very rich who will shape our future for us, even though we have not voted for him to do so. And he's saying there needs to be a global superstructure to advance humanity under a totalitarian control. And, of course, he feels that Facebook is going to be the vehicle for that. And this may be his reaction to the fact that people are starting to turn away from Facebook over its very obvious and overt attempts to censor content and to decide for us what we will see, read, and hear. Now, getting on to gun rights, a little bit of an interesting statistic. Apparently, carry permits for firearms across the United States have now exceeded 15 million. There are over 15 million carry permits nationwide, plus the 13 constitutional carry states. And this is definitely pushing us back to the restoration of the Second Amendment. And by the way, there has not been this sudden outbreak of gunfights in the streets that the gun grabbers insisted would happen if you let law-abiding citizens carry guns. In fact, everywhere that concealed carry is allowed or constitutional carry is allowed, crime goes down. That's always been the case. Where is the highest street crime and murder rate taking place? In those cities and states with strict gun control. Chicago first and foremost. The gun crime is out of control because only the criminals have the guns. And there was an object lesson a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, down in Kennesaw, Georgia. I'll tell you about Kennesaw when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And some years back, there was a town in Georgia, Kennesaw, and like many other towns, they had crime going on, burglaries, that kind of thing. And the city council got together and they voted through a city ordinance saying that every home in Kennesaw had to have a firearm. And crime plummeted. And crime is always going to go down when the criminals understand that most, if not all, of their potential victims are armed. Now, the gun grabbers don't like that. They want a safe work environment for the criminals to rob and rape and steal and do whatever it is they're doing. This is why I've often said that anti-gun is pro-crime. We're going to take a phone call here. Jim in Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Long-time listener. I don't call very often, maybe once every 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
But listen, I've been hearing you say for years that you and Claire would like to leave Hawaii.
Yes.
And you have, talked about going back to the West Coast and all. But there's an area that you might want to consider, and that is East Central Alabama.
Okay.
The economy here is great, man. We actually do have a 4.5% unemployment rate. Mm-hmm. The people that do the hiring for the manufacturing around here cannot find enough people. The housing market here is fantastic. I live in a subdivision out in the country, and in the last 2 years, they've built over 40 new houses, and they've all been sold before they were finished.
Well, it's good to hear that you're doing well in that part of the country. And I know some parts of the country are still doing well. What concerns me is how many parts of the country are doing very, very badly and how that condition is spreading. And by the way, just to sort of correct things, Claire and I have no intention of going back to California. What we would like to do is maybe someplace like Indiana, where the housing prices are much lower than what we're having to pay here. And we'd be close to family. Claire has family in Indiana. I have family in the New England area. But coming from here in Hawaii, if we get rid of all of our junk and even just taking the essentials, like Claire's harp, we're still looking at $25,000. And that means, we're going to leave our car behind because it's not worth taking. But all the estimates we've got from the moving people, it's still $25,000 to get us back to the mainland. And that's basically just taking the computers and a couple of pieces of furniture and basically selling or throwing away the rest and having to restart from scratch at the other end. And it is rather amazing. But Claire and I have become what are known as Hawaiian sourdoughs. We're sour on Hawaii, but we don't have the dough to leave.
Well, anybody else who's listening, and is looking to relocate, Alabama's not that bad. I mean, I lived here for about 7 years. In the area here in Auburn, Opelika, the police are friendly. They're not off the chain killing somebody every other week. And, you know, it's really not too bad here. So, you know, for anybody out there listening and you're looking to relocate or looking for a job, check into East Central Alabama on the I-84 or I-85 corridor. It's not too bad.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a beautiful part of the country. I mean, I'm originally from the eastern part of the country, and so I know what it's like back there. And yes, it was a thrill to come out here and live in Hawaii, and we didn't think it was going to be as permanent as it turned out to be, but we would like to find a much less expensive place to live. But at the moment, we're just barely getting by. We're trying to just deal with our debts, and you know, I'll be honest. When Trump won, I thought this would be the beginning of the rise of the independent media, and there'd be a lot more money coming into it. But now the corporate media is literally at war with us. They're going after our advertisers, and so it's a very ugly time here. But who knows what the future will bring? Thanks for the call, Jim. We're going to let you go and take time for a commercial. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to Donald Trump's travels to Saudi Arabia. The White House has just issued a statement joint with Saudi Arabia saying it is necessary to maintain Syria whole and united. And they're saying the conflict must be solved through political means with the country's unity and territorial integrity maintained. That is a major policy shift from the U.S. side, which was talking about carving off safe zones in a new Kurdistan, and I'm wondering just exactly where that came from. But it is a major policy shift, if true. All right. Now then, do you remember the big stink that happened a couple of years ago over the fact that the Nestle company was literally sucking water out from California's aquifers for mere pennies? And it turned out their water permit had expired years ago. It was just years ago, and it was this big stink, and nothing ever really came of it. And it turned out that the Forest Service, rather than Nestle, were supposed to maintain the water permits, and they never really did. And it turned out that there was this one individual named Zimmerman who basically played a key role in not letting this get out of control. Well, he's now retired, and he apparently left the Forest Service in good standing. They actually named an award after him, the Zimmerman Community Partnership Award. And now Zimmerman is, in addition to his retirement, he's now a paid consultant for the Nestle company. And Nestle continues to suck the water out, put it in bottles, and sell it back to the people of California. Oh. Now, over in North Dakota, that Dakota Access Pipeline, it's not even fully operational, and it has sprung 2 more leaks. Leaking oil onto the land, and that was exactly what the concern of the Sioux people were, that it was not going to be safe, that it was going to poison the land, potentially poison the water, not just for their reservation, but downstream as well. And it's happening. Because they build these things too cheap to maximize profitability. And that has become a curse all over our nation, all over the world. You can have these technologies, and they can be safe, but you can't let the money junkies make the safety decisions. Because they'll always cut corners to save a few bucks for their bonuses. We saw that at Fukushima. We saw that at San Onofre. And we certainly are seeing it up in North Dakota. And apparently that seems to also be the case down in Hanford. Because now they've had a second release of radioactivity. Apparently this one was a little more severe. Some of their workers were actually contaminated. They're having to go through the decontamination process, which is not pleasant. because it basically removes having several outer layers of your skin scrubbed off to make sure they get the particles. And remember, there's two ways that radiation is a threat. The first is exposure, but that's over and done with. Contamination is the worst. That's where an actual emitting particle, microscopic, gets under your skin, or you inhale it, or you ingest it, and then it just sits there radiating and radiating and radiating. There's no way to find it, no way to get rid of it, and you suffer the ill effects. But apparently the latest concern, this is being reported over at NN News, is they're conceding that these facilities for the plutonium process used reactor fuel rods to get bomb stuff out of them, that all of these facilities have not been properly maintained. And these plants are literally falling apart. And of course, Hanford as a whole is the most contaminated place on planet Earth. And I remember when Claire and I were living briefly in Washington State, we knew Hanford was there, but we were upwind and upstream of it. But we were aware it was a problem, and a lot of people talked about it. A lot of people talked about family and friends they had downstream from it who had all kinds of cancers and problems. Somebody needs to come up with a good, effective way to clean that mess up. And they can't. No more than they can clean up Fukushima or Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island. Now, apparently, now that we're finally out of the snow, just a week away from the start of summer, Angela Merkel has decided she's going to go on the warpath against the climate change doubters. If you doubt climate change, we're coming after you, you global warming deniers. And again, it's a reminder, this is not science, it's politics. We want to impose a carbon tax on you. We want another justification for deciding how you will live your life to save Mother Earth from global warming. It's like they're absolutely convinced that once June gets here, we will all forget about all this record snow that we had this very, very late spring. They're still pushing that agenda because they want your money. And they want more control over how you live your life. How many light bulbs you're going to have. How many square feet you're allowed to occupy. Now, getting on back to computers, in addition to Seth Rich leaking the DNC emails, there was this other scandal. Sort of came and went. There were these 4 IT workers in the House of Representatives. And they were fired for improperly accessing the computers of members of the House of Representatives. And they were just sort of shuffled off because there was already too much attention being paid to things like private email servers and the security risks that they posed. Now, according to Blacklisted News, there's a growing concern that members of the House of Representatives are now being blackmailed with information stolen by these 4 IT workers. And it tells us 3 things actually. The first is, yes, members of Congress are doing icky things that they can be blackmailed for. 2, IT security inside the government isn't as great as you would expect it to be, certainly from all the movies and TV shows. And 3, that, again, we can't rely on NSA, FBI, CIA to do anything about this. That's also underscored by this other story where apparently over in Russia, the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs has arrested a hacker group which was installing viruses on smartphones to steal money from customers' bank accounts. And they did succeed in stealing about $900,000. Then the Russian government caught up with them. Going to throw them in jail. Now, why is it that the Russians can find and arrest the cyber criminals and the U.S. government cannot? Because it always does seem that the cyber criminals in this country, they get away with everything. We very rarely hear about the ransomware writers being tracked down and arrested. Does not seem to happen, does it? Over in Dubai, Dubai's police force now has the world's first robot policeman. Now, it's not exactly the RoboCop you saw in the movies, but apparently it just wanders around and it greets people. And it was debuted at this 3-day Gulf Information Society Expo and Conference. In other words, it's a gizmo for a convention of gizmo people, the geeks. And so this officer is walking around and greeting people. And I don't know if that's actually any law enforcement authority, but apparently whatever it does, it's doing enough of them where they're actually going to start bolstering the Dubai police force with these units. In fact, they're saying somewhere down the road, 25% of Dubai's police force are going to be these robotic police officers. And my guess is they're probably going to be best suited for things like guiding crowds or various other things in areas where there's not a lot of violence. I'm sure the technology is still in a very, very early stage. But we have seen some amazing things coming out of Boston Dynamics. They are moving along on that. And it's fun. Robots are a lot of fun. There is a new ransomware out there, and apparently it is using 7 different cyber exploits from the U.S. National Security Agency, and the new malware is called Eternal Rocks, and this worm is much more dangerous than WannaCry because it does not have any kind of a kill switch built into it. This one is unstoppable. And it was discovered by a Croatian tech security advisor, and the warning has gone on out. So thank you, NSA, for developing these very, very dangerous cyber weapons and not taking good care of them. This is sort of worm could bring down businesses. WannaCry paralyzed the National Health Service. This could actually bring down computer networks in banks, which gets on back to that earlier caller saying that if your money is inside a bank's computer and the computer network goes down, how do you get it out? Good time to maybe make sure you got most of your cash at home. Or this could be the beginning of a new virtual 9/11. And who are they going to blame for this one? Oh, it's the North Koreans again. No, it's the Iranians. It's the Russians. We have to go bomb them. Now, maybe years ago, instead of the NSA figuring out how to fill the internet, the routers, smart devices, computers, with all kinds of holes to peek at us through, the NSA would have actually been doing the nation a greater service in devising systems that allow for actually rapid back tracing of anything that is sent to us over the internet to make cybercrime more difficult. Instead, they've made it a lot more easy. There are all these exploits out there that they know of, they will not share, so companies can't plug them. And now their tools are out in the wild being used for all kinds of nefarious purposes. I think that is really seriously a whoopsie. That is a major, major whoopsie. There's going to have to be a dedicated push to improve security and verification of traffic on the internet. One of the methods used to attack servers, including mine, is a DOS attack with spoofed IPs. Meaning that the packets are sent on in with randomly chosen IPs as the source, so that you can't filter them by IP. If you have 5 million requests come in from a single IP, you can drop that in the filters. But if each packet is coming in with a new made-up IP, very hard to stop. It would be easy to stop if there was built into the internet system something that goes back down the chain of all the hosts it's gone through and verifies that, yes, it really did come from this one originating machine. And if it doesn't, you ignore the packet. There have been suggestions of this kind of security mechanism in the past, and always it's met with, oh, the net can't take the added bandwidth. It would just be too much stress on our Internet. Well, how much stress on the Internet is being caused by these ransomware worms? And it will get worse. WannaCry was not the first. This one will not be the last. Unless something is actually done, there's going to be major problems in the future. And this is where governments, including the U.S. government, and all of these computer intelligence agencies can actually earn their salaries by finding a way to solve this problem. And I'm waiting to see them actually make the effort to do it. Meanwhile, Hawaii's own Representative Tulsi Gabbard has introduced a bill to permanently end warrantless collection of Americans' emails. Go Tulsi. If she runs for president in 2020, she's got my support. All right, let's take a phone call. Kevin in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Greetings from Puget Sound.
It's a lovely, lovely part of the country. Claire and I used to go out sailing there.
80 degrees and a breeze today. Okay, you mentioned something back at the beginning of your show about the Democratic National. There was people trying to get their money back for, contributing to the PAC. I wanted to bring up, there's a class action lawsuit that's going on against the Democratic National Committee, and it seeks to prove that they had actively worked against Bernie Sanders. Whether you're for or against, wherever you land on it, it's just that they manipulated. Their argument is that they have the right to rig the election. But here's where the story really gets tied into the Seth Rich deal. They hired a process server to serve the Democratic National Committee. And also, there was a group that came along that wanted to do a documentary on it. So they recorded the gentleman doing, the processor server doing his job. The guy ended up dead. He's dead. The family found him in his apartment. He was a reputable process server. They found him with 3 different types of drugs in his system. He was not a known drug user, but it's just another body count to it. And so their first move in court was that they said that they wanted to challenge the process server, not knowing, the lawyers did not know that it had been filmed and that, it had already been documented and the rest of it. So this is the lengths that the Democratic Party will go to clean house. But people have to remember, it's not just the Democratic Party. They are in as tight as 2 fleas on a dog with groups like the AFL-CIO. There's other groups and action committees that are tied to them that when these people...
Kevin, sorry to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today. We're still talking with Kevin in Washington State. We're talking about Sean Lucas, who was a gentleman who actually served the Democratic Party and Debbie Wasserman Schultz for this class action lawsuit regarding the fact that the Democratic National Committee threw the nomination to Hillary Clinton, and they wanted the lawsuit to be delayed until after the November election, and they tried to claim that they were not properly served. And of course, Sean Lucas wasn't there to testify, yes, I served them on thus and such a day, but there was a video made. There was a video made of the service being done. They still managed to keep the lawsuit out of the corporate media. And again, as Kevin was saying, the Democrats are literally trying to defend themselves from the class action lawsuit by saying that the Democratic National Committee has the right to overrule the voters or ignore the voters and just decide what candidate they want. And that is not exactly by the rules. Moreover, it's going to be insulting to the Democratic rank and file, who think the Democratic National Committee is supposed to be representing their wishes in the election, and that certainly did not happen. And that may be why support for the Democratic Party is plummeting right now, because all of those people who supported Bernie Sanders, they're not going to be sending in money to the Democratic National Committee anymore. They're going to be looking for someplace else to do what they're doing. So, Kevin, does that about sum it up?
It does. And Mike, I would like to say, if I could, there's a very good video on YouTube that has hyperlinks to the case and the background on it. The title of it is Shocking: Democrats Argue Their Right to Keep Rigging Elections. And one other thing, if I may, there was years ago, there was a case that came up against the news organizations, accusing them of lying, and it came back that they're not there to have to tell you the truth. And I would say to anybody out there, just remember what it is on the. We used to be able to take things at face value. None of this is face value. And I'm bringing this up not as a Democrat. I'm an independent, and I think people have to realize when Donald Trump got elected, there were just as many people that said anybody but Hillary. And so it wasn't that people were for Donald Trump. It was just anybody but Hillary.
Well, that was kind of my attitude. That was kind of my... If Bernie Sanders had won the nomination, I probably would have supported him.
Well, you know, Mike, I guess it goes back to this whole deal that is what is on the face value. You know, you send your money into something like the Clinton Foundation, you know, where 97% of it was kept. And, you know, the people in Haiti never got the money. So, you know, at this point, the knowledge is out there. And so we stop being victims to all of this, and we actually start being volunteers to it, because the information is there, Mike. And you keep up the good work. Even though we got the same weather you got in Hawaii, have a blessed day, okay?
All right, thank you. Well, it's a little warmer here in Hawaii than it is where you are. There's the music. Time for the end of the show. I got to go talk to Jim Goddard up there in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, share what you learn here with everybody that you know, and we just need to keep putting the truth on out there and keep pushing back against those liars. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.